Creator, and I meant to look up the expression pour out, and I didn't. But I just did a quick search and it's everywhere. I pour out. Anyway, that's what's happening. Psalm 142 and verse 2, there's the one I was actually looking for. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my trouble before him. How full do you think the bucket was that he poured out, pre-pouring out? Probably to overflowing. So Wyatt, it's kind of like that, those buckets after the beetle trap is sat there and you put the water in the bucket. And you're right, it just stinks something, it's bad. And you just pour out the stink before God. You pour it out. So that's what we find. Good and bad, we have this wide spectrum of expressions. Now, not surprisingly then, there are all kinds of different genres of psalms. Some where the worshiper is soaring. All things are going well, at least on the surface. And the mind is full of exclusively of God's benefits or God's mighty works. And so there are these soaring hymns of praise. What would be on the other end of the spectrum? From the soaring hymn of praise, where he says, forget not all his benefits.
Places like where he says, wake up God. They're beating me up.
The expression, wake up God. Where are you at, God? God, I'm hurting. God, save me. I want us to think for a good while tonight about the genre of the lament. There we go. The lament psalms. Of the many genres of psalms, I think this one has certainly a lot to offer us. It would be the polar opposite of the hymn of praise certainly on the emotional spectrum. Psalm 42, I think, contains some elements of lament. This was in our daily Bible reading, I think, depending upon what, for us, the way we do our 4 days, it was today's reading. Let's read this one. As a deer pants for flowing streams, we're familiar with that already, aren't we? So pants my soul for you, O God. So we see right off the bat there is this urgent need, this longing that can only be satisfied by God's presence. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? Did this happen while David was fleeing from Absalom? Couldn't tell you, but this expression certainly fits. He was driven out of Jerusalem and away from the temple. Or actually not the temple, it had been the tabernacle. My tears have been my food. How often? Day and night. Can you relate? While they say to me all the day long, where is your God? These things I remember as here it is again, I pour out my soul. How I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. This one, by the way, isn't even identified as a Psalm of David. I've made an assumption there about that. Verse 5, why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? And then there is this pivot of thought, and we see this in a lot of the laments. Hope in God. How could he insert the word hope? Everything seemed hopeless. Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. Which is a continued refrain in Psalms 42 and 43. You're familiar with several of the laments. Can you relate to any of them? As you've read the laments in the Psalms, you weren't assigned to. Are there any expressions that in your personal study have stuck with you, and I'm going to guess why they've stuck with you, is because they've finally given expression and helped you to put to words what you've been feeling inside all along? Now, asking you to share that, maybe if you're comfortable sharing that, if you just want to share the expression, we would all be edified to hear it, but I'm just asking you to think, can you relate to any of those? Why are these psalms included, do you think? Chris?
Maybe because life's not easy, and especially without God.
Is that important? Was that important for the Israelite? So that would be important for the Israelite then. We could certainly see how that would be important for us now to receive instruction from that. Life isn't easy. There's an understatement. Casey?
So much of their uneasy life was due to their own disobedience. And as they would constantly turn to God, turn away from God, turn to God, they just on repeat. But it does show that everybody has lament in their life and has deep troubles that, they see no resolve to, and they turn to God, what
Yeah.
shall I do?
Yeah. So it creates an opportunity for the worshiper not only to give full voice to their sorrow or their complaint, as the case may be, but then to take that several steps further, one of which would be to think about why the sorrow exists, perhaps. Is there any of this? I mean, there are many reasons for suffering. But one of them certainly could be the fact that I'm suffering consequences of some choice I've made. That's one possibility. But we see that exploration of that, okay? And the psalmist, it talks about, and even jumps to talking about some of the causes of that. Sometimes the psalmist is confessing, yeah, there's sin involved in this equation. Sometimes it's enemies. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's and not or. Sometimes it's several things.
But the
yeah.
answer is still the same, coming back to God.
Okay. Eventually, some of the answer is the same. You come back to God and to the throne of God. Wyatt? That's a good point.
I wanted to share this. I was just looking through and found Psalm 79, verse 9, just kind of touches on this. Help us, O God of our salvation, for the glory of your name, and deliver us and forgive our sins for your name's sake. That I can 100% relate. Well, right off the bat, to help us. There have been times where I've tried to do things alone and go it alone, and honestly, there's not really anybody that could help but God.
But God.
And
Yeah.
and that kind of that verse 9 does touch on and forgive us of our sins.
Yeah.
We put ourselves in these situations.
Sometimes we are the woman with the hemorrhage in Mark 5, and we've tried everything else 3 times, seemingly. And God's the only option. And as difficult as that journey, no doubt, is for us, that's an important place to reach. God would prefer we reach it sooner. But He's most concerned that we reach it at all. And then we're back to Him. Do any of our hymns express lament? Now, I've just asked you quickly to go through some 700 songs and hymns for worship, plus 100 in our supplemental hymnal. Okay, it's a little bit, but just off the top of your head, I'm not going to wait too long because we might wait the rest of our class for somebody to come up with Okay, you could come up with one. Could you come up with 5?
Healing in its wings.
Okay, there we go. Boy, I'm glad I didn't offer money to somebody to come up with one. Oh, Father, I do sin. That's got the tone of lament. And the music fits that. It's a mournful. How many? I'm surely not the only one that weeps when you sing that song. It is emotionally powerful, but only because the message is powerful. Chris. Oh, Lauren, sorry.
In the hour of trial.
In the hour of trial, Jesus, plead for me. That's lament-like. Okay, so we probably could come up with 5. Do I hear 10? No. A lot fewer, though, than songs of praise. Not making any comment about that. I'm making an observation. How much admonition or warning do we do? Probably every invitation song does that. We're always need to be asking, is our hymn repertoire, for instance, doing for us what we need it to do? And there are other ways of expressing these thoughts, certainly. We could pray a lament, right? Surely these songs are adaptable to both. Even though many of them do say to the choir master, they were intended to be set to music, what music would you pick? Well, would that make the top 100 on Billboard? I bet not. Can you sing a lament? Yeah. Would it be different than, our current method of, music writing really works for a lot of reasons I won't get into. Maybe there are other genres of psalms that need something else. Should Christians sing laments? Oh, now we've taken away. Can you? Oh, well, yeah. Should we? And now we know that if we say the answer is yes, then you know what the next question is going to be, right? Not necessarily. It could be, why have you not? But I won't even presume to know that. Because look, in prayer, no doubt, we're praying laments. I don't doubt that at all. But I found it, as just for myself, as I'm looking at this, how awkward it would be to sing. We're going to read some of these here in a minute, and I defy you to come up with music for it, although Brother Basford did. He assigned some existing tunes to them. Really did a good job. Do any of our hymns, well, we already asked that question. What kinds of things are being lamented in the Psalms? What did you ask, Danny? Where are you at? God? Was that the question you asked earlier? Okay. Well, I clearly don't either, but something along the lines
Well,
of...
it's about, we're away from God, we went down the road, now we're
Yeah.
back to God.
Yeah.
Does that help?
There are the questions that Philip Yancey in his great book, Disappointment with God, the 3 questions no one wants to ask out loud. Is God, and I'm going to get the order of them wrong, is God hidden? Is he silent? Is he unfair? I may have missed one of those. Pretty good book. So good I can't remember the 3 questions, right? No, really good read. John?
And I don't know if this is really part of the lament, sometimes it is, but another thing that a lot of these psalms, well, it's like you're asking God basically to defeat his enemies also, and it doesn't talk to like any kind of, a lot of times it's like a battle type language, like this one in Psalm 64, it says that God will shoot at them with an arrow, suddenly they will be wounded, so they make, those kind of language, and others, and, rescuing enemies, let's talk about content, Psalm 35, content, O Lord, with those who contend with me, fight against those who fight against me. I'm not sure many of our psalms have that.
Sunday morning. Would you want to sing that one? Let your arrows pierce the wicked.
Yeah.
Go to Psalm 69. Sorry, John.
Well, I was going to say, I can't think of many that have that kind of language. Maybe we sing. We talk about battle belongs to the Lord things, but we don't ask him to shoot our enemies. And I know it's kind of poetic language and things too, right?
Sure.
You know, but it's pretty strong language on taking out his enemies somehow, removing them from.
Yeah, we're just kind of going there and thinking about some of this stuff tonight. Here are one author identified 7 elements of a lament psalm. I'm just going to put these up here, and Psalm 69 seems to have all of these, so we'll point them out. There's an invocation combined with a plea for God's help. There's an expression of complaint, some sort of complaint. There's an element of confession, either of asserting one's innocence, which seems presumptuous to us, or a confession of wrong, Psalm 51 and others being an example. Some sort of confession. There's, of course, the fancy term for this is imprecation. We call these imprecatory psalms often, the laments that have this invoking a curse on, or seeking punishment of God's enemies, is the imprecatory nature of this. Basically, to put this in maybe more readily memorable terms, asking God